Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Living in Switzerland. The series is brought to you by Rigby. We are a staffing and project services company based in Zurich. If you or anyone you know of is looking for a new role in Switzerland, or if you're looking to hire, let us know. We'd be happy to help. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. Then, if we have anything that might be of interest, we'll gladly let you know. Today, we are joined by Kelly Brändli, a dedicated dating and relationship coach, as well as an expert ADHD coach. With over a decade of experience, Kelly combines a unique personal journey with ADHD and professional training to help couples, families, and individuals navigate the complexities of neurodiverse relationships. Drawing on her background as a dating and relationship coach, Kelly empowers clients to improve communication, manage conflicts, and build healthier relationships, especially when ADHD is in the mix. Having worked with countless families, couples, and individuals, Kelly offers a compassionate and practical approach that has transformed the lives of many. Outside of coaching, Kelly is the mother of 2 boys with ADHD and the partner of a late diagnosed man. She is a passionate advocate for ADHD awareness and lives in the beautiful Zurich Oberland with her family and gorgeous ADHD support dog Ice. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation, for giving me the chance to share my knowledge with you and all your listeners. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it'll be really helpful. So, obviously, we've already heard a little bit about you, but could you tell us a little about maybe how you came to live in Switzerland and all that?
Yeah, sure. So I came to Switzerland back in 2001, and I was in a relationship then with a Swiss man. And
Mhm.
so, as many, I came for love, but I always say I stayed for the love of it because it's such a beautiful country to live in. At that time, I was, in a corporate job working in the pharmaceutical industry.
Mhm.
And then my life took a bit of a change shortly after my son was born, and my marriage started to crumble. And that put me on a new path and journey in my life. And wanting to have a healthy relationship after my divorce, I got into the field of matchmaking and then dating coaching, relationship coaching, and that's been my life for well over a decade now, working in that area, and I absolutely love it. And then I got into a new relationship
Mhm.
with a really wonderful man. And as part of that journey, we discovered, that his son has ADHD. My son had
Okay.
already been diagnosed.
Okay.
And then we learned that he has ADHD as well. I learned that ADHD is genetic, and when a child has it, there's an over 80% chance that one of the parents has it as well. And
All
so
right.
that started
Mhm.
us on
Mhm.
the diagnosis journey. And as a result of that, I have developed this extreme passion for helping couples and families who are impacted by ADHD learn to manage the symptoms better so that they can thrive and have a happy home.
Amazing. And it's a lot of people, isn't it? It affects quite a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the diagnosis rate is about 5% in Switzerland, but there are
Okay.
estimates that it can be as high as 15%,
Right.
especially in adults, because the diagnosis rate is really low.
Mhm.
Only about 2.5% of adults are actually diagnosed in Switzerland currently.
Okay. Okay, so a lot of them maybe don't even know.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And so you obviously were dating in Switzerland as an expat, right?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Some people, I think, when they first arrive, or maybe if they work in an English-speaking job, they feel like they're in a little bit of an expat bubble. So do you think it's easier to date another expat while you're living in Switzerland, or do Swiss people and expats also frequently date?
There is this sort of belief in Switzerland that the Swiss are not open to expats, but
Mhm.
I wanted to kind of break that myth. So I did a little research before our call today just to find
Okay.
out the statistics from the federal government, what they put out
Yeah.
in terms of marriage levels in Switzerland. So the last data they've published was from 2020.
Mhm.
And there was 35,000 marriages happening in Switzerland, and 34% of those were between Swiss and an expat. So
Okay,
the
wow.
Swiss do date people from outside the
Mhm.
country. Only 15% of the marriages happening were between 2 expats. So
Okay.
it's actually, a higher number of Swiss marrying people from other countries. So don't believe that theory. I think what's important is understanding, that the Swiss have quite strong traditions, quite a strong culture.
Hmm.
And if you come and are open to integrating, to learning a little bit of the language, to learning what's going on in the country and how things work, then I think people should have no problem actually dating Swiss and creating very happy relationships with the locals.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. So, what are your best tips for an expat who maybe is starting to look at dating in Switzerland?
I think, as I said, learning the basics of the language is really
Hmm.
important. A large portion of the Swiss population do speak English as well,
Hmm.
but they tend to be a bit reactive when you just approach them in English. So if you can approach them initially with a few words in Swiss German by saying, grüezi or hoi, something, very basic, then it puts them not on the defensive and they're much more
Okay.
receptive to then switching and speaking English. So
Hmm.
that's something important for people to know. Also about understanding what's going on locally in the country. So staying up to
Interesting.
date on, current events.
Hmm.
There's two English newspapers or digital newspapers that I always recommend people read. There's the Swiss Times, and then there's thelocal.ch, which has everything in English. So you can always stay up to date. The Swiss culture is very much based on democracy. So there's a lot of referendums, which is a common topic that the
Right.
Swiss will be discussing. So you'll want to make sure you understand what's the next vote that's coming up. What are the different sides of the argument? What are people talking about? And then you can have these discussions. And I think that makes the Swiss much more open to wanting to interact with expats.
Okay, that's a really good point. That's an interesting one. Yeah. And what about where to find people to date? So I know a lot of people, they primarily think about work. Like at first, when they maybe come, their work is their main source of social contact. So do you think it's a good idea to then also branch out and try to find people in other places?
Definitely. In my dating coaching, I talk about three ways to date. I say there's passive, active, and online dating. So
Okay.
passive dating is meeting people just going about your day to day. So that would
Mm-hmm.
mean meeting people at work. It could also be people, who share the same commute with you than you see
Right.
regularly on the train or the tram, those kinds of things. Active dating is important. It's about trading either time or money for the chance to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And here I recommend people get involved with local groups. It could be a sporting group if you're interested, it could be some kind of hobby. It's important that you have what we call proximity. So you see the same people over and over again,
Right. Yes.
which is important for building relationships. It's much easier that way than just, going up and speaking to a stranger on the train. If you're, going to say, right now everyone's into paddle as a sport. If you go to a paddle club every Thursday evening and you see the same
Mm-hmm.
people, then you start to build a friendship and then it's easier to transition that then into a relationship. And then the
Yes.
third one is online dating, of course, we know
Okay.
is still a really popular way to meet people. Switzerland has a lot of the big, popular dating apps. It also has a lot of niche apps as well that are very oriented to the German speaking market, but you can actually use those apps even in English.
Okay.
I met my partner on a dating app and he doesn't speak a word of English. My profile was in English. And when we first started communicating, he used Google Translate to reply to me. So it can work. It's not an issue to put up an English profile on a German speaking app.
Okay. And then how would you deal with the language barriers? So you mentioned that was with your husband, that was initially something.
Yeah. So I actually am fluent in Swiss, so it wasn't a problem. I didn't
Okay.
realize that he doesn't speak English at the beginning, which is a bit of a funny story because I just assumed he felt more comfortable writing in German, but I didn't know that he didn't understand my English at all, which was quite funny.
Yeah.
But like I said, the vast majority of people do speak English. The Swiss are very good with languages, as you know. They've got four, I guess three official languages, and then plus English is four languages that quite a few of the people understand, especially, in corporate jobs, people
Hmm.
tend to be fluent in English. So in most cases, that's not really a major concern.
And in cities as well. They tend to be more fluent, right?
Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Any other tips about dating apps in Switzerland, like what to do, what not to do, maybe?
Yeah, I think the dating app scene has changed quite a lot post-pandemic. So
Okay.
there was a massive growth in dating apps, and then there's a lot of people have been leaving the dating apps recently because of some of these changes. So it's important to be very clear on the apps what you're looking for.
Okay.
So not all apps, even though we think people on an app are looking for a long-term relationship, that isn't always the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's some apps that have a reputation of being more of a hookup app. There's other ones that tend to be more long-term relationship focused. So you want to choose the correct app for what you're looking for in terms of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about kind of like the fast and the slow apps. A fast app is like a Tinder where you're just swiping, so you're
Okay.
very quick. And then we've
Yeah.
got slow apps like something like a Parship where you're having to fill out a questionnaire and give a lot more data. Those apps tend to
Okay.
be much more relationship focused.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important differentiator. And then even when you're on an app, to be clear what you're looking for. I always recommend being open and honest. A lot of people will lie about their age and post photos that are 10 years old.
Right.
Doesn't do you any favors because when you actually meet somebody, you want them to be pleasantly surprised when they meet you and not disappointed. You don't look
Yes.
like your 10-year-old photos. So don't do that. Um, just sort of general app etiquette. Don't
Mm-hmm.
put naked photos or men topless photos, bathroom selfies, these kinds of things. You see them all the time, but they're not actually great ways to attract the right kind of partner on a dating app. So don't do that. Photos are really important. And then don't use the app as an actual way to date. I think that's a misnomer to say that they're dating apps. They're actually just places to meet. And
Okay.
so you want to get off an app as quickly as possible and get into
Mm-hmm.
an in-person meeting, whether that's a telephone call, a video chat, or actually going on a date. People have this sense that if I talk to somebody for weeks or months on a dating app, I can trust them.
Oh, I see.
And
Yeah.
the reality is that when we communicate, only 15% of what we communicate are our words. The
Mm-hmm.
rest is our tone of voice, our facial expressions, mimics, etc. And so on an app, you can only ever get to know 15% of a person. So it's a false sense of trust that people build up. And actually, the longer you stay on a dating app before meeting, the higher the risk is that someone will try to take advantage of you through a dating app scam,
Oh, I see.
through
Okay.
asking for
Interesting.
money.
Yeah.
So I always recommend try and get off the app as quickly as possible and meet in person.
Okay. Yeah. And then you have this 3 date rule. So
Yes.
what's that about? So let's assume that all went well and the people had the first date.
Yeah.
Why a 3 date rule?
Yeah, it's not the 3 date rule that I think we used to say, like no
Yeah.
sex before the third date. No, it's not that. We are in a society where everything happens so fast, and we think that we can make decisions. And I encourage people to date somebody 3 times before they make a yes or no decision, because, today's society, a date is often, an hour coffee date. And
Hmm.
how can
Yeah.
you understand if you're compatible with someone in an hour coffee date? You can't really.
Okay.
So I always
Yes.
say, date somebody 3 times and give them a chance to see them in a different environment. So you might have a first coffee date, then you might do something active on a second date, and then a third date might be more the sort of dinner where you get to really ask questions and check compatibility. And
Okay.
so I think it just encourages people not to sort of be on this quick swipe. Oh, next. There's always more people, and actually to give somebody a chance to get to know them.
Yeah, and people might, during the first date, they might be nervous or they might not feel fully confident to show themselves. So I guess by the 3rd date, you're more likely to get the real person.
Exactly. And I always tell people first dates can be really great. Second dates are often not as good as the first date
Okay.
because now there's expectation coming in.
Yeah.
A lot of times first dates people will go and they might be nervous or they might be more authentic, but then on a second date they'll act a bit strange. And then
Okay.
on a third date, there's more of this comfort coming in where they can again act more like themselves. And so through 3 dates, you should be able to see the true person sitting
Mm.
in front of you.
Are there any exceptions? Like, when should you not go on 3 dates?
Exactly. So I teach people a method that I've developed, which I call my 5+2
Hmm.
dating blueprint. And in this, we go through a person's values to really understand what their 5 core life values are and their 2 deal breakers.
Hmm.
And your 5 core life values are basically how you live your life. And we often think that so many things are important. Like if I asked you what are important to you in a partner, people often give me a list of like 15, 20 things, and they're all sort of equally important. And I encourage them to say, okay, what are the 5 most important things you need in a partner for you to live your authentic self?
Okay.
And then what are the 2 deal breakers where if a person had this, there would be no point in starting a relationship. So an easy one is, for people who want to have a family, right? If they meet somebody who never wants to have children,
Hmm.
there's no point in starting a relationship and hoping they change their mind.
Yeah,
Better
absolutely.
off finding someone else who wants kids, right? And so
Hmm.
that's a deal breaker. And so then in that case, I would say don't date that person a second or a third time because that's not going to change. So you want to be clear what your 2 deal breakers are
Yeah,
and be looking for those in those first 3 dates. And if one of those pops up, then, you don't continue dating them. And there can be all kinds of things as deal breakers. It could be, somebody's use of alcohol or drugs. It could be
okay.
their status, whether they have children, want children.
Hmm.
There can be certain values, maybe I had one guy who owned a boat and loved to sail, and a deal breaker for him was a woman who got seasick
Of
because he
course,
spent so
yeah.
much time. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it could be, it's always unique to you, but those are kind of things where it doesn't make sense to go into a dating process with somebody who's never going to be compatible with you.
That makes sense, yeah. And maybe one thing that comes up sometimes with expats is expat-related excuses. Because
Yeah,
sometimes people are reluctant to date because they say things like maybe, oh, I'm only here for a year. I don't really need to get settled. Or, oh, I don't speak the language. I can't really date in Switzerland. So what would you say to that?
I hear that all the time. And I also hear so many expats who've come here planning to stay for a year. I was one of them.
Mhm.
I've now been here 24 years.
Wow.
People come to Switzerland and fall in love with it. So
Hmm.
I think, we need to put those excuses to the side because you can't put your life on hold indefinitely, waiting,
Yes,
to say, I might move again. Yeah, you may move again, but maybe you find your life partner and you guys move together. And so it's important not to keep using an excuse. It's my career, I'm abroad, whatever, to put your personal life on hold. I have so many clients who said, a decade's passed and I keep using
yeah,
these same excuses. And, now women who said, I wanted children and I waited too long, it's important to prioritize this side of your life and not always put the career in the number one spot, even though it is an important aspect. I used to be
absolutely.
a headhunter myself for many, many years,
Okay,
and I learned that many people keep changing their job thinking that's what's going to give them happiness. But
okay.
at the end of the day, they really want someone to share their life with.
Mm.
Yeah,
So prioritizing that, even if you do think you might only be here temporarily, or um,
exactly. Yeah. And being
it's
open about it when you're dating people, to say, I don't know how long I'm going to stay in
okay, yeah.
Switzerland. How do you think,
Mm.
And, a lot of the Swiss love to travel. They
Yes,
are open to moving. So, even if you met someone Swiss, it doesn't mean that you would have to stay here as a couple.
that's right.
A lot of them are quite open to saying, oh, okay, if you go back home, I'd love to move with you back there. And so, don't always assume that you know the outcome. You need to
Right,
be
yeah, that's a
open
good
and
point.
talk about it and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge group, the Swiss expats. I'm obviously one of them, and we're about almost 10%, I think, of the Swiss population lives in another country. So definitely we're open to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and so now another nice one is some things to do on a date in Switzerland. So let's go through what you would suggest. Obviously, there are almost endless possibilities, but any
Definitely.
ideas?
Yeah, I think, in Switzerland, being active and being outdoors is certainly a key.
Hmm.
I'm not a big fan of the coffee date. That's
Okay.
something I tell a lot of my clients. So I usually recommend that on a first date, you do something where you're walking.
Okay.
It's a nice way to keep the conversation going. You've got things that you can always talk about as you're moving around. So whether you go on a hike together, you go walk around, a lake somewhere, depending on where you're living. A nice thing if you want to do a coffee date is combine it. I say, take the cogwheel train up to Pilatus and have the
Hmm.
coffee up there,
Okay.
get the fresh air, the
Yeah.
sunshine, especially, when we're in fall right now, when we're in the fog, to go up above it and just have that feeling. It's important on a date that you create a positive atmosphere because that transfers actually to the person that you're dating. You associate the
Oh, yeah.
positive experience with the person.
Okay.
And so just sitting at a coffee shop and having like an interview date is not a super exciting
Hmm.
experience for most people. So do it at the zoo or go on a wine tour or in Switzerland we've got these fox trails, so they're like scavenger hunts, which
Okay.
is something fun to do, gives you conversation, and those are great kind of first date ideas. And then, like I said, do something different for your second and your third date. On a third date, I generally recommend people do the kind of more romantic dinner date because
Okay.
then you
Yeah. Yeah.
really have a chance to look each other in the eye and ask those really important, deep questions where you want to know, like, what are your views on starting a family before you make a yes, no decision if you decide
Of
to keep.
course. Yeah. Yeah. So going a little deeper there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about your work. So who comes to you? Who can benefit from your help?
Well, I have been working primarily with expat singles in Switzerland for the last decade. Now
Hmm.
I've kind of transitioned more in terms of dating work. I work a lot of people who are with neurodiversity
Hmm.
and their dating lives and their relationship lives. So that's been a bit of a transition recently with my focus on ADHD. But, I still do private dating coaching for those who are interested in and looking for some guidance. What is different about the work that I do to a lot of other dating coaches is I always say you need to become the one before you find the one.
Okay.
And that process is a lot of self-discovery.
Yes.
And so for people to say, this 5+2 model I have, a lot of people don't know what their core values are
Hmm.
or what a good partner for them actually looks like. And there's this idea that, chemistry or this spark is what we are looking for to determine a good partnership. And actually, that's a really great way to determine someone you're genetically compatible with to reproduce, but it's a really poor litmus test for a good partnership. And
Right.
so you want to understand what compatibility is for you. And that's a big part of how I help people in coaching is getting to know themselves, getting to know what a good partner for them would look like, and then how to actually go about meeting them and vetting that person before they get into a long-term relationship.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds so helpful. So how does the coaching work? So if I'm a new client and I come to you, what happens next?
Yeah, so for dating, I have a program that's called Dating Mastery, which is a series of modules with different videos and training that I do. So, for example, like I would explain what the 5+2 model is and how we go about creating your 5+2. There's
Hmm.
workbooks. And so people start by going through the modules and the workbooks. And then in private coaching, we meet on a weekly basis and I guide people through all this work that they're doing and ask those really important questions that people often don't think to ask themselves.
Hmm.
And I have one client, talking about what we were speaking about. Should I date someone local? And what if I want to move one day?
Yeah.
And, it's through that process of me probing that she actually came to the realization that she's been in Switzerland now for 16 years and she probably will
Oh,
never go
wow.
back to the US. But she
Yeah.
just had that in her mind, like one day I'm going back.
Hmm.
And so it was keeping her out of the dating game. And, just by me
Right.
probing her, it was that light bulb moment where she's like, you know what, this is my home. I don't see myself really ever going back. And I've just bought into this excuse that I've used for so
Yes.
many years. And so sometimes that's, just that question can shift someone's mindset completely and give them a different approach to not only dating, but to their life in general.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right that often these things are excuses that people use just because it can be quite daunting if you don't know where to start, or maybe, yeah, you're in a
Yeah.
new place. But
And
yeah,
we do that. We don't question our own beliefs,
yeah,
and we always look for evidence to prove what we believe. And so
okay,
if we keep
yes, true.
believing I'm leaving, then we're always going to look for evidence for that. We're going to see
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, outside, but we won't follow them. Something subconsciously will stop us.
Okay,
And that's the importance. I mean, whether it's dating coaching or just life coaching in general, it can be so powerful of helping you really question your thoughts and where
yeah,
you've been focusing your attention. So that's
yeah,
why I love what I do. It's great to see how it can transform people's lives.
yeah, it sounds amazing. So how can listeners get in touch with you if they want some additional help or to book an appointment?
Yeah, I think best is you'll put my links in the show notes. I think visit my website, whether that's kellybrändli.com, where I do dating coaching, or Sinaps.ch, which is about neurodiversity, relationship, and dating coaching. You can contact me there, as well as all my social media links. I'm on all the big platforms. You can connect with me there, and I'd be really happy to hear from people. If you're interested in setting up, we can also have a first call on my website. So there's a link to book a call with me. So I invite anybody who's interested to go ahead and do that.
Okay, great. All right. So that's it for today. Thanks once again to our guest, Kelly, for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And thanks to you for listening. We'll include links in the show notes to our guest and to further materials about some of the topics that we've spoken about today. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing and project services company here in Zurich. If you would like our help either to hire or to be hired, let us know. Best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. You can also sign up for our newsletter at rigby.ch/newsletter to receive our Living in Switzerland guide. We'll send you one email per month about expat-focused news and jobs in Switzerland. So thanks, and until the next time.